Welcome back to Warthog News. This week, 1.98 dev server was open. So let's talk about all the things in there. But first, be sure to hit the subscribe button to get into the vehicles that were in the 1.8 dev server. Before we jump right in, first I'd like to explain how it's going. We're going to start with the US tree and then go down the line. And there should be timestamps so you can jump to whatever tree you find most interesting. And so for the US, the aircraft that they had in the dev server was the F3H2, coming after the F9F8. Honestly, I don't have a whole lot extra to say on this thing that wasn't already said in the developer stream or on my video of the developer stream. Personally, it kind of seems like a mini Phantom to me, only being at 9.0 and not supersonic, but will definitely be a good ground attacker for when we need to attack the ground, and handling the aircraft seemed pretty alright. It would be able to handle itself in a fight if it does stay at 9.0. And up tier, it's probably going to be bait. The new tank for the US, the HSTVL, in the first dev server was not modeled very well. However, in the second one, they made up for it, giving it its insane depression and crazy fast reload of 1.5 seconds, although I've heard that it's supposed to be a bit faster. So in gameplay, combine that with its great horsepower and low profile, is quite the destructive vehicle. Now the penetration isn't too great, but at 1.5 seconds, you can do a lot, regardless if you can penetrate their regular armor. Imagine the automatic, but not Italian, much lower profile, and more than 15 rounds of ammunition that is effective against tanks. On the dev server, it was ranked at 9.3, but I have a good feeling that this thing could find its way up to 10.0, especially if the ammunition got its proper penetration, which is apparently around what the Abrams can penetrate, and also if it got that shorter reload rate that I was talking about. The one major drawback of this vehicle is the reloading of the autoloader. It takes quite a long time. So if you are careless with the ammunition there, you can find yourself in a sticky situation where you have nothing to throw back at the enemy. However, in most engagements I found myself in, though this was dev server battles, so they're a little weird, you could generally take care of an enemy tank in 2 to 3 rounds, and then by the time you engage another one, you'd have 1 or 2 more rounds loaded up. For US Navy, there was the USS Cleveland, which while looks cool, it kind of just functions like a Brooklyn with 1 less turret, and incidentally, it comes right before the Brooklyn. A few other interesting things that happened to the US tree. The M1A2 got its thermal vision preset changed from Gen 2 to Gen 1, which essentially means that now the commander has thermal vision as well as the gunner. The XM803 and the MBT-70 had an increase to a fire rate of 6 rounds per minute to 8 rounds per minute, and the XM803 had an increase to its battle rating from 8.7 to 9.0. And as well for the US, the M1 Abrams, the first one, is being down-tiered from 10.0 to 9.7. And for the H-64A and the P-10, got a bit of a buff, having their stingers moved to the ends of their wings, allowing for the installation of more wing-mounted weaponry. Last thing I guess I could say about US is that the Phantoms got some sort of laser bomb designator thingy. I was unable to figure out how it functions correctly, though I saw some other people were able to. I'm not sure how useful it's going to be though. But this seemed to apply to both the F4E and the F4EJ. For Germany, they're getting 2 new planes. Well, they're getting 2 old planes in their tree for the first time. The F86K, which is an F86K, and the G91R4, which on the first dev server was in the main tech tree right after the R3. However, on the second dev server was a Golden Eagle Premium. I'm not exactly sure how many Golden Eagles, but it was a Golden Eagle one. As well as it had gotten a new skin, a Toger looking skin. Kinda cool. Other than that, it seems to have the same armaments as the Italian G91R4, as well as their F86K. It seems to have the same armaments as everyone else. The new German tank on the dev server was the Kampfpanzer M48 Super. So this time around, I actually have some information on what exactly this tank is. It's a M48A2GA2 with added on smoke grenade launchers, applique armor, a new turret drive, a weapon stabilizer, a new engine, transmission, and several other things that probably don't affect gameplay that much. Overall, in-game, it's quite alright. Thanks to the new engine and transmission, it's quite speedy for a M48, and the gun is that of a Leopard, so it has the same ammunitions. The added-on armor isn't anything too special. It does really well against heat FS, however, you're going to be running into a lot of APFSDS, which it seems to do little about. Personally, I'd actually rather have a few more Leopards, though I am not upset about this thing because it does look kind of cool, at least from the front. Other things related to tanks, wasn't an actual tank added, was the Ostkitten, which unfortunately is not a little kitten for your tank. It is Eastern tracks or something of that sort. Essentially, it makes Panzer IV tracks wider, giving them a bit more traction and durability. Though I think the greatest aspect that they gain from this is that makes your tanks look cooler. And cool looking tanks is exactly how the Germans won the war. Oh wait. Beyond that, there were no other vehicles for Germany in the dev server, though there were some other things, like for example, the first Arado got JATO, as well as the KPZ-70 battle rating went up from 9.0 to 9.3. The Russians got one new jet, the Su-7B, which you probably heard about in my last video. Well, this time around it now has rockets and bombs. However, unfortunately, the rockets and bombs aren't exactly anything to write home about. It's kind of your stock standard armament, though they will probably be quite useful at killing tanks, as you can carry quite a few rockets. The best part about the plane is probably that it's quite fast and will definitely work well as a fighter. Their new tank destroyer, the P9157 Chrysanthema, have left quite a few concerned on its abilities to lock onto enemy tanks and fire missiles from afar. And while it sure indeed can do that with 1200mm penetrating ATGMs with tandem warheads, it does actually have a few limitations in which the lock-on might not actually be as useful as some might think it could be. The first one being that the lock-on can't actually function if the radio dish does not have a direct line of sight to the enemy vehicle. Now, it does seem to be able to get through trees, but solid objects like, say, a dead tank, it will not be able to lock onto the enemy. So you won't actually be able to just sit behind a hill and lock onto enemy targets as they come for you, unless your little radio dish is also above the hill. Another one being that it's not intelligent like you are and will fire the ATGM directly at the center of the vehicle, and commonly that could hit, instead of a weak spot, a strong spot, or the cannon barrel, allowing the enemy to retreat. So these slight restrictions make me consider whether it's going to be the OP monster that we're all scared of or not, and I'm very curious to see how it performs in an actual battle, not just some crazy custom battle. The only new Russian boat in the dev server was the Project 56 Spravedlivy. I think I just butchered that. It was armed with two turrets of two 130mm cannons, as well as a bunch of 45mm anti-air guns, and overall seemed to be a pretty good destroyer. Think of it kind of like a tech tree variant of the Project 41. And also for the Soviets is that the T-55 AM-1 has been changed from 8.7 to 8.3 across the board. For the British, on the dev server there were two planes, the Scimitar, which was, I swear, just implemented so the British could have something that has bullpups, which it did have 4 of them. Pretty neat. The other one was another F-4 Phantom that had the exact same loadouts as the existing one. However, this one came after the Scimitar. I believe is that this one is a dedicated naval aircraft and the other one in the tree is for their Air Force, yet both of them can land on carriers. In the terms of tanks, they didn't get any new ones except for, I guess, the Challenger 2 F2, which we've talked about a bit already. Overall, it seems like a pretty alright tank. In the first dev server, it was quite slow. In the second one, it had gained a bit of speed. I'm not too familiar with the other Challenger 2s, but this one seemed to have a bit thicker armor, especially near the lower front plate. However, it still seemed to suffer from the other spots on it that are very easily to penetrate, like the driver's hatch and the gun breech and the lower front plate. There was an upgrade kit that you could research as a module to give yourself a bit extra side protection, though the more interesting thing that it did was added a table to the top of your tank, which I guess would be rather handy if it was time for tea while you're going to a battle. But they also got 2 Stuarts, which I guess fits because they did use those. However, if you're going to be adding copy paste to the British tree, why not the M22? They made great use of the Locust, and I'm sure people would be happy to see another one, as it is quite the meme vehicle. In the terms of naval vehicles, they had the HMS York, which seemed like an alright cruiser. However, it was lacking in the anti-air department. Their new rockets that they got a dev blog about didn't seem much more than Tiny Tims. Note, I actually forgot to test them all out. I was busy doing more important things like sleeping, but the ones on the Wyvern fired both at the same time, making them not exactly great for ground attacking, and seemed to fail to destroy the AI ship that I was shooting at. But speaking of missiles, apparently the Fire Streak missiles have been fixed and now will guide by pursuit. I'm not exactly sure what that means, and I forgot to fire them, though I doubt I'd even know what was happening if I did shoot them at something, but it sounds like a positive thing, so yay. And in terms of not so positive things, unless you had unfortunately run into one of these on the battlefield, the QF Ram AA hull has unfortunately been nerfed and is now no longer rolled homogeneous steel, but 19.05 millimeters of structural steel, except for the elements of the basic chassis, which reduces it to the equivalent of 8.57 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. So I guess it's not the worst, because currently it's only 10. Japan actually received quite a few aircraft, 3 of which being B-6 dive bombers. You'll be getting the B-6N1 Model 11, the B-6N2 Model 12, as well as the B-6N2A Model 12 Co. Bomb loads of all these aircraft seem to max out at 800 kilograms, which is pretty good for killing tanks with those big 800s at 2.0, as well as some smaller bombs if you're going to take them out and bomb ground targets in ARB or arcade. In armament-wise, defensive only, because they don't have any forward-facing guns. They get better as you go down the line, having the 2A armed with a 13mm, not just two 7.7s. It's great to finally see these famous dive bombers in game, as they did quite a lot in the Second World War. Now, if only we could get the B-26 in game. Japan is also finally getting a SAM added to their tree, the Type 93, which is essentially a Toyota with some stingers in the back. Technically not a technical, but essentially it is. Now, as a SAM, I don't think this is going to be a very good vehicle. The missiles don't seem to be that effective, though there's a lot of other bugs with the vehicle, so perhaps also the missiles ineffectiveness is also a bug. But even if they worked right, they are IR lock-on missiles, so they have a limited range, unlike some of the things like the ADETs, where they can shoot off 10 kilometers. And you can only reload them once you've fired all 8 of them. And the biggest drawback is you fire one missile, you miss, and the plane strafes you, and you have no armor and 2 crew, so you're dead. So altogether, it sounds like a pretty bad vehicle. Probably the worst they've ever added to War Thunder, correct? No, actually, it's the best vehicle they've added to War Thunder. Not because of its combat prowess, because of the memes. You see, it has one upside that no other vehicle can compare to. On the dev server, it was the fastest vehicle in game, as well as had the best acceleration, resulting in this being one speedy boy. Ironically, it's blue as well. In addition to that, when it is in game finally, it will become War Thunder's Drift King. Like, let's just go through this real quick. It's fast, so we can make fast memes about it. Either Initial D, because it drifts as well. We got Tokyo Drift, we got Sanic. It's a technical, technically. It seems to be an endless amount of memes that surround this thing. The greatest part that comes out of this is it opens up the possibility for other nations that get a regular car with ATGMs or SAMs on it. A Humvee with a tow missile on top would be a great addition to the US tree, as they currently don't have like a stock standard tow vehicle, except for that one that is a squadron reward. Japan also got a new cruiser, the Tone, which has all of its turrets in the front of the ship, which could lead to some pretty interesting gameplay techniques, like hiding half of your ship, yet still having full firepower. Now, historically, the back of the ship was used for float plane tending, but unfortunately in game it is used for nothing but housing a few anti-aircraft guns. It's quite a letdown, especially in the case of the Tone. The Gaijin has not put up any effort at all on adding scout aircraft to their larger ships, as War Thunder's greatest attribute is the combined arms gameplay, but they're really letting that aspect down in naval without the addition of scout planes. I'm not even asking for carriers. I am asking for carriers. Gaijin, please, carriers. I know you said no, but come on. But scout planes, they're modeled on the ships, and it would be so cool to throw off a airplane and have it scout out enemies for you, especially during confrontation. Japan had also received 3 helicopters on the dev server, the H-1S Early, the H-1S, and the H-64 DJP. There's not a whole lot to talk about here because they're not that different than their US counterparts, except for in a few minute areas, like for example, the H-64 DJP started with a 20mm cannon but could upgrade to a 30. That could be a dev server thing though. I think the most important aspect of Japan getting a helicopter tree is that once again they have finally gotten a twin engine aircraft. Now, there's a few other changes that I would like to talk about with Japan. One of them was the Ho-203 37mm cannon that is in 2 aircraft, I'm pretty sure, had a double of its fire rate, so it might actually be useful. But the greatest change is that the armor layout on the T-90 is finally being fixed. Finally, the composite armor will line up with the outside of the turrets. However, it did not seem to increase the amount of protection it gave, unfortunately, though it does increase the area it covers, so now the sides of the turret are a bit more protected. Of the things that China had gotten, there wasn't too much different than what we had already known. For example, the F-86 F-40 was an F-86 F-40 with air-to-air missiles that changed the battle range from 8.7 to 9.3, as it should be, and it was folded with the prior F-86 that China had. The ZSD-63 was exactly as I expected. Not that great of a spag, but great tank destroyer for its low battle rating. The speed was quite low, but the test drive was on dirt, so you can only get around 30 kilometers an hour, but you had more than enough penetration to either get through the sides of a tank or damage the tracks and barrels of an enemy tank. The largest drawback of this vehicle, though, is that to reload, it takes forever, and you don't have much ammunition in the belt, but it will definitely be doing its job that it was intended to do, shooting tanks in the side and not aircraft. Oh, also, it's not amphibious, unfortunately, so don't drive it into the river. The T-69-2G is exactly what you'd expect it to be, a Type 69 with a copy of the L7 cannon, a stabilizer, and no thermal vision. Although there are some people citing sources stating that it's supposed to have a 120mm cannon and thermal vision. However, according to the store team dude, they are going off user manuals of the vehicle, so that would be quite hard to prove otherwise unless someone could get their hands on an actual one and measure the width of the cannon. Another odd thing that this vehicle had was an anti-air round. It had a proximity fuse shell for its main cannon. A little odd, but I guess it could be useful against helicopters, though the velocity wasn't that great. Now, Italy, many suspect to be the star of the show, but they technically are, technically aren't. The real star of the show is the F-104s being added to the game. With 5 of them being added to the game, but only one available in the first dev server, the Italian one, the F-104S, it was quite the vehicle, carrying a total of 6 AIM-9Bs, as well as a good number of rockets and bombs. And as a fighter, it was more maneuverable than I was expecting. The thing is long and like 75% engine, so of course it goes really fast, but I was also able to turn the vehicle. Not exactly the best turning vehicle in the world, but I'm just surprised it could do it. Now, the other 4 F-104s that were in the game were the A, C, G, and J. The A was going to go to the US and China and could carry 2 AIM-9Bs. The C was also going to the US but could carry 2 AIM-9Bs, 76 FFARs, and 3 750-pound bombs. The G was going to go to Germany and China, could carry 2 AIM-9Bs, 2 AS-20s, 3 750-pound bombs, 3 250-kilogram Marta 25E bombs, which are apparently anti-runway bombs. I can't really find out exactly what they're online, but all the search results were pointing towards that. But they could also carry 3 500-pounders, or 3 1,000-pounders, or 14 Hydra rockets. And the last one, the J, could carry 2 AIM-9Bs, 2 AIM-9Es, 38 FFARs, 14 Hydras. I couldn't really say much on the performance of each individual plane. They all seem to fly the same. However, apparently the S is the best performing one, so I guess that does make Italy the star or Starfighter of the show. But it's quite hilarious and expected that once again, when Italy has a new tree added to the game, the name of the patch, despite following convention, should be named around the new tree, for Italy is not named after their new tree. I can't wait for Italy to be added to Enlisted, only for the patch be named like Modern Warfare or something like that. But let's talk about what else Italy got. For tanks, they didn't really get any new tanks. Well, I guess you could count one. The M4 Hybrid, which is a mix of like a cast iron and a welded Sherman. By the end of the day, it's just a Sherman. They also got an M3A3, an M24, an M4A4, a Sherman Firefly, and an M18. Now, the Sherman Firefly isn't your any old Sherman Firefly. See, it's at 5.3 because it can fire APDS. Same APDS as the Comet. I raised the question though, is the British going to get APDS for their Firefly, or will they get a new tech tree Firefly with APDS? Personally, I would prefer the new Firefly, as it would unfortunately destroy the 4.7 lineup that I have for the Brits. And of course, not the namesake of the patch, but the Italians are getting a navy, which honestly seemed a little lacking, but overall it doesn't seem like that bad of a navy. They had lots of 20s and 40mm guns, which are pretty good at boat combat. The destroyers are unfortunately not the greatest. They typically had some pretty long reloads and not that many cannons. And their first cruiser class vehicle didn't really seem like a full-on cruiser. It just seemed like a really big destroyer. The most important part of the Italian Navy to talk about though is the anti-ship missiles. How do they perform? How do they feel? Well, they don't feel like they're going to be too OP. They do feel a little bit like they're going to be a nuisance. The small vessels in the test drive that I tried them on, they would always get one shot, and the amount of damage they did to the destroyer in the developer livestream was misleading, or at least had changed when the dev server went live, as they would black out a single section of the destroyer. So if the destroyer was small enough or already partially damaged, you could indeed sink a whole destroyer with all of your missiles. However, I also found that at long distances, the targeting started to be quite inaccurate, as the missile's flight path would get quite wobbly. The French finally got the Mirage 3C, and it's a very interesting vehicle. Strangely enough, it was at 9.0, though that could still be a placeholder battle rating, and could carry one type of missiles that could pull 30 Gs, as well as a third very large missile that they talked about on their live stream that I'm not sure if it was functioning entirely correctly in the dev server. But the more interesting interesting aspect is actually it could forego its main guns in exchange for a rocket booster. The idea itself is rather interesting and perhaps could lean towards Gaijin adding more vehicles that don't have main cannons on them. Flight performance wise, it turns rather well and is pretty speedy, though it's definitely no F-104. In the terms of tanks, they're getting the D2, which I kind of said everything I need to say on it in my original video on its dev blog. It's a very boxy tank with 40 millimeters of armor and the turret of the B2. And at the battle rating is at, I think it will do quite well. They're also getting the AMX-13 M24, which is indeed a M24 turret on a AMX-13. And it functions kind of like a M24, but with an AMX chassis. Not a whole lot to say about this vehicle. And like the other nations, they are also getting the M4A4. Sweden just having 2 patches themed around them, are getting the short end of the stick this time around, only receiving 1 new tank, the STRF 9056, which altogether seems like a pretty solid vehicle. It's essentially a CV90 with the same 40mm murder cannon, but also can fire ATGMs. And the ATGMs being top attack ATGMs, kinda alright. They don't go for a direct strike on the top of the vehicle, so the impact isn't as great as it could be, say if it came from a javelin. But they'll definitely be useful in interesting situations where enemy vehicles are behind cover. And some other interesting things happening to Swedish vehicles. The STRF-74 is being classified as a light tank and will receive scouting, improved optics, and airstrike modifications. The J-35D received its new missiles, the RB-24Js, which will definitely help it on the battlefield. It also received some rockets that it could use against aircraft or tanks. And the A-21RB rockets now fire separately. As for miscellaneous changes, starting with the new maps, 2 new maps got makeovers, Kursk and Italy. Kursk makeover was less intrusive. Really all they did was make the town in the center bigger and add some train tracks. They also moved the cap points a tiny bit. The town in the center is actually kind of more wide open, and the train tracks are pretty good for wheeled vehicles if you want to get to the action real quick, though you'll probably die fast. I read somewhere someone complaining that the map is no longer like what Kursk really was, with long-range tank engagements and all that, but like, I guess they kind of forgot that the majority of the map has been untouched, so if you want to have tank sniping matches, there's plenty of room to do that. As for Italy, really all they did was clutter the map bit and open up some other areas. There's still not much cover at the spawn points, but a few other issues people have with the map have been taken care of. Overall, I think it's a better map, but I still think it has major issues. There's also some changes to Poland. Now the rocks on the western side of the lake have been lowered a bit. Another interesting thing that happened is all laser rangefinders now have an increased range to 9,999 meters, and the gun sight optics have now been scaled up to 6,000 meters. Chinese and Swedish helmets can now be unlocked and or purchased, and there's also a separate part that you can only purchase. There's player icons for Swedish crew, as well as decals for Swedish ground forces, and achievements for Italian Navy. And I've saved the best change for last. In ARB, after 15 minutes of gameplay, if there's only 1 enemy left on the enemy team, their location will be marked on the map and be updated every 20 seconds. I am very glad to hear this, as runners are one of the reasons why I stopped playing ARB, was runners and base campers. I find it hilarious that it has taken Gaijin this long to find a solution to the issue, but regardless, I'm happy it's here. Now, if only there was a way to take care of base campers. In my opinion, they should just remove base AA completely, or maybe at least after 20 minutes or so. And that is all the changes that I care to cover. There's other minute ones that I don't think are that important, but I will link below some data mines and the official dev server patch notes. Unfortunately, some of the quotes that I'm going to be sourcing I won't be able to link because I've unfortunately lost those, because whoever is running the rumor roundup thread on the official forums decided to change the name 4 times, and it killed the links that I was using. So before I close out this video, first I'd like to thank my Patreon, Thundybot, thank you very much, as well as a new Patreon, Red Fox, thank you very much for becoming a patron, as well as my YouTube members, including a new one, Nico Korkamaki, thank you very much for joining, as well as the Royal Rat, Pyotr Koglinski, I like them thick, Mehmet Hizarchi, Amorax, Juplopsky, Tex, One Max, Roger Rammer, Grimace, Mighty Peppers, Pointless Gun 6, and Waffly Joker 6. A big thank you to all of you. Patrons and YouTube members get unique Discord roles, as well as videos uploaded a little bit early. So if you'd like any of that, feel free to join either Patreon or YouTube membership. But if you have any comments, concerns, or questions, be sure to comment down below or on my Discord. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, don't like button. If you want to see more, I make War Thunder Weekly News videos every Sunday, make random views throughout the week, and I like to stream on Saturdays. So be sure to hit the bell icon to be notified anytime I upload anything. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. In the terms of bonus news, apparently they're not going to be numbering the patches anymore, which implies that they don't actually have anything special saved for 2.0.